Hello everyone, and welcome back to the workbench for another locomotive build. We're doing this week a Conrail MT-6 Slug in HO scale. These were built out of Alco RSD 12 and 15 units for yard usage back in the 70s by Conrail, mainly for hump yard service. So for this build, we're going to go ahead and we're going to need a few parts here. As you can see, we're already starting to tear down an Atlas RS11. Mainly what we're going to be using from the RS11 here, it's a donor. We're going to use the frame as well as the motor and drive shafts. So basically, we have to start off by disassembling this RS11 unit. And the one I chose, well, at least the one I got a deal on here, actually is one of the older yellow box style ones that doesn't have the coupler boxes on the end of the frame, so the shell pops right off. You can see the trucks are popping right off. You just got to take and kind of wiggle them off, wiggle off the worm gear cover. And then here, of course, is our ST35. We're going to go ahead and we're going to pull our coupler boxes out of this. We're going to be using the trucks from the ST35 for this build because I'm modeling the later version of the MT6s, and those featured like the old flexi coil style trucks under them. So now this particular ST35 I have here, this is one of the master line models from Atlas, and this one had I got a bit of a deal on it, of course, because I'm not going to spend too much money on something I'm just using for parts, and the front truck was already loose. So as you guys kind of see, it's already wiggling around a little bit. Right now I'm unhooking the power wires from the board there to be able to get the truck free, and there you can see I'm popping the drive shafts out as well. And I'm going to set all that off to the side. Mainly what we're using from the ST35 here is the trucks, and that's really it essentially. Maybe a few other small parts here later, but that's the main pieces we want. So we go ahead and get that part. Now I like to put the coupler boxes back on the frame, that way I don't lose them. That way it kind of keeps them together, because I always tend to lose those. So first, our big piece here from Pacific Northwest Resins. There you guys see the information. Now, as of right now, these aren't available. The gentleman that makes them, I believe, is going to start making them again in the fall. But right now it's summertime where he's at. It's too hot to be making these. But I picked these up a few years ago, and hopefully these will be available again in the fall. Look up the Pacific Northwest Resins Facebook page. But here you can see I'm kind of taking the shell and I'm doing my base fitting here with this. And I just put the shell on the bare frame deal there, and then put the trucks under it to try and figure out how the trucks are going to fit and how much swing they are, because when I did this build I had no real idea how this was going to work out, so I was kind of figuring it out as I went here. So right now I'm kind of eyeballing to see where I need to make room to make the trucks fit and swing properly. Now, when I originally started doing this, I hadn't looked at the prototype photos super close, and you'll see why I'm saying that here in a minute, but you can see I'm kind of chipping away a little bit here at the stepwell area, thinking that was going to get me where I wanted to be. I'm also cleaning up a little bit of the flashing off the edge of the shell as well, just to kind of neaten it up a bit. These shells, they have a little bit of flashing, they'll have a little imperfections here and there. You just got to clean them up with a hobby knife, and it's kind of is what it is. The amount of time it would take me to actually cut down an Atlas shell and make one of these would be astronomical, and I guarantee it wouldn't come out nearly as good as this resin shell is. So I know some folks aren't the biggest fan of some of these resin shells, but I can't really complain with them, just because I'm not that good at doing body work, and this is way better than what I could get to by trying to do it the old-fashioned way by cutting something down. So either way, you just got to do a little bit of cleanup with them. It takes a little bit of time. It kind of is what it is with it. Right now I'm cleaning out the area for the number boards there with my knife, because you get that like really thin resin flashing kind of deal inside there. You got to clean all that out, and the best time to do that is before you start doing all your fitting work and stuff, is to go ahead and clean up the shell first. But as you can see, I'm going down that road of thinking that I'm gonna, make enough room by just trimming the back corners of those steps there, and I'm going to tell you guys now that's not really going to work. But here we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the end of the fuel tank out, because again, I'm trying to get more truck swing room to make it around the curves on the layout. So this was one of the things I was kind of looking at. I'm like, you know what, I could cut the ends of these fuel tanks out and kind of recess them a little bit, but still leave the outsides the same, and that'll get us closer to where we want to be. And you guys can tell we're starting to get somewhere. We're getting a little more swingage. Still not quite as much as what we're going to need, obviously, but we're getting a little bit closer here. So definitely cut the ends of the fuel tank out, give you a little bit of space. It's not the most prototypical thing, obviously, but it's going to give you that little bit of extra swing room that if you have like a 22-degree radius curves, that kind of deal, somewhere in that ballpark, you'll be fine. You won't have to worry about derailments or anything. So just kind of working on the inside here. As you guys can tell, I'm using the old score the inside and try and break it out deal. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you gotta come in with a little bit bigger knife to cut that out. But we're just gonna keep working at that. You can see here, for some reason I cut on the outside. Then I finally get smart and I get the chisel blade and just start really getting in there, and that'll get that out of there normally. And then we put it back on there. Now the biggest downfall of cutting the ends of the tank out is the tank's loose. But you can see we're getting somewhere. We're getting a little more play. Not a lot, but we're getting a little bit more. And that's what I want to see, is I have that little bit of play there on the inside. So I just kept beating this dead horse here with trying to cut the end of this fuel tank out, because I hadn't quite realized what I was missing yet, which you guys will see here in a minute. Because I'll pull up the pictures of what I missed from looking at the prototype photo at first. It was right in front of me and I didn't see it. But either way, it still ended up helping to cut that down. Cut the end of the tank down just to make sure that I had as much possible swing room on the inside. Now here's our prototype photo. There is the way these were built in the late 70s, the standard step ends. Look at those steps. It's a straight up and down, nice and even there. And you guys are going to see now as we zoom in here, oh, Conrail did a little kit bashing. They have where it's actually like inset some. They actually almost cut the entire step well in half. And basically that's what we have to do on our model here to also make the flexi-coil trucks fit under there. As you guys can tell, it's narrowed up. So once I figured that out, it was pretty big moment there when I finally noticed that in the pictures. And at that point it then became we got to cut out half the steps now. So to do that, basically I just kind of took the knife and crudely kind of went halfway down the middle of the steps and just started hacking away at it until I got it to be about half of the steps being gone. As you can see, I'm coming in and filing a little bit there. And I wasn't super concerned with having it be perfect or anything. I just wanted it to be good, because when you're working with the resin shells, they kind of chip and they break a little bit when you're trying to take chunks out like that. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be all that noticeable when it's done. So you can see I've got some sheet styrene here out of my scrap bin, and what I'm doing is I'm making the basically what will be the other side of the steps here out of that. And I'm just taking that and kind of eyeballing it off the prototype photo and putting that bend in it the same as the real units had, where it widens back out towards the top of the steps, but it's narrow at the bottom where the trucks would be at. So we're just kind of test fitting and trying to cut it and test fitting it and trying to cut it here to get it to fit correctly or close to correctly. This is one of the things where, again, if you want to rip your hair out and spend 5 hours trying to get this exactly perfect, have at it. I spent about an hour doing all 4 of them, and I'm happy with how it turned out. I think it looked pretty good. But again, once I got that piece about to where I felt good about it, I went ahead and got some CA glue and put it on there, and then we just glue it in place like so. And then, of course, once I did one step here just to start with, and then I put the trucks under it just to see what we were looking at and kind of getting a good idea. And I felt good about that. I felt like that was going to get me where I needed to be. So I went ahead and started doing it on the other 4 sets of steps here. Again, just kind of taking the knife and kind of working at this here. I kind of started off here at the top, right where that top cut line would be. And then I kind of went ahead and just chipped away about halfway through the steps. As you can see, it kind of chips apart, just kind of working at this. And then again, taking another piece of the sheet styrene and just kind of putting it in there and eyeballing it and getting it about close to where I want it. Trying to get it as best of a fit as I can get in there without spending forever in a day. So again, just put the piece in and kind of, get your bend marks kind of figured out. just kind of get that piece to kind of fit in there. And again, it's not going to be a perfect fit because of how when you looked at the prototype photo, there's that kind of slanted piece that there's no real way we can get that to really fit and work perfect. So just get it close enough for what we're trying to do here. But so we're going to do that all the way around the locomotive, also all 4 sets of steps. And once we get in that with that, now as you guys can see here, now we're going to start mounting our trucks. I drilled a hole right there in the frame. That's where the trucks are going to pivot at. Now I drilled that hole there, and we have to put a piece of sheets. We have to use some styrene over the top of that. This is the thicker stuff. I can't remember the exact size. I'll end up adding everything in the video description later. Probably won't have time to get that up today when the video goes up, but before I go ahead and put the sheet styrene and CA glue that in place, I like to drill the hole in the styrene first. That way I don't have to worry about it popping loose from the frame when I go to mount. It makes just make sure it doesn't come loose from the frame. Because I've had that before where I figured, oh, I could just put this piece on here and then I'll just drill right through the frame into the styrene and make the hole, and it doesn't work that way. You end up just taking the styrene clean off because it'll stick with CA glue to the frame, but it won't stick very well. It'll stick enough for general usage and handling. It just won't for like a modification type of thing, like you're trying to drill a hole. So as far as those holes that are drilled like in the frame there, that's just going off of a rough photo I'd had from another person that did one of these builds, where you're pretty much just drilling the hole a little bit off a center just because of how these trucks pivot differently. So now we got our styrene on there. Our trucks are just mounted in there. They're not actually hooked up to anything, but we're going to hook them up right now with our drive shafts. And these drive shafts will kind of take a little bit of work. You got to kind of shorten them up a little bit by kind of pushing on them and messing with them to try and get them to fit correctly, because it's a very tight fit. These are the drive shafts from the RS11 that'll work with the SD35 trucks. It's one of the nice parts about Atlas is that a lot of their parts are interchangeable like that. And here you can kind of see me fiddling with the worm gear, trying to get it to turn down and shorten up a little bit so that our drive shaft will fit and it won't be binding up or anything. You just got to keep playing with them. Sometimes they'll, like the one end kind of went really well, and then this end you're going to see I pretty much have to pull the whole worm gear off the drive shaft and file it down so that it will fit correctly. But you kind of just fiddle around with it, put it in there, spin your flywheel, and just see how it's turning and get an idea. Here you can see there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to sand that down so that way we could fit that back into the end of the drive shaft a little bit easier. Do a whole bunch of sanding, And go ahead and put it all back together. And then we will put it on. And there we can see it's turning nice and smooth and straight there. So now for our the little covers for the worm gear here, they have that little rounded nib like on the end of them. What I'm doing with the chisel blade there is I'm cutting that off so it's flat, and that'll make it similar to the factory trucks that came on this, and it'll make it holding on there. Once you get that little nib, see right there, I'm cutting that nib off, and that'll give us what we need to hold our truck in place on there. And with our pinholes in the bottom that the trucks sit in, it keeps them nice and right where they should be. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw our shell on, and we're just going to see where we're at and do a little test here just to moving the trucks around. Oh yeah, look at all that truck swing. We got plenty of swing now that we got those steps cut out and the fuel tanks trimmed up. You really can get some really good truck swing. Oh my gosh, I was happy with how that turned out. That was one of my big concerns with this project, is I was going to put all this work into this thing and it derail before it even make it out of my yard on the layout. So I was very happy that I actually managed to get these to really run well. As you guys saw there, I used a little tape there to hold down the wires inside to hold it down to the body there. That way I could kind of keep them in place when I'm putting the shunts so they're not getting bound up anywhere. And right now the other thing I'm doing is I'm kind of trimming down where the motors mount and stuff, that way, or excuse me, where the decoder board deal would go. I'm trying to get the shell to sit down flush on the frame, or as close to flush on the frame as I can, and that can take a little bit of fiddling. Kind of trimming down on the inside of the shell a little bit, like on the bottom of the sill. There's some things, some little nubs that you got to trim off. Now here's where it gets interesting. I was bound and determined to have a keep alive on this model. As you can see, we have a TCS KA2 keep alive. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of looking at my frame area near my motor and trying to figure out where I could cut and grind out with a Dremel tool and a grinder to basically fit that keep alive down there, which you guys will see shortly. I did, but I'm kind of eyeballing it to get a good idea there of where I got to put that at. So I'm going to start taking this apart, because I'm going to have to take the frame out to the garage to do this next part. But what I'm going to do is I'm kind of looking, I'm trying to figure, like, well, if I cut here, if I cut there. And what I ended up doing is I ended up taking and cutting out along the one side, because it was already kind of hollowed out there. As you guys can see, I'm kind of marking this off with my knife there, just to kind of tell me about how much I need to take out. And there you can see I'm chipping away some paint. That way I know when I get out there exactly how much I have to cut down and how much I got to take out, and just to give me a good idea of what I need to do there. Now what we're doing here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start preparing our shell right now for our lighting, etc. Here you saw me use the little push pin there on the marker light hole, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm drilling out the hole now with a little bit of a smaller size drill bit. I always come in with a small bit, and then I come back with a bigger one that'll actually fit the entire light location there. So start off with a smaller bit and then come back with a bigger one, because the smaller bit's a lot more forgiving. So if you're a little bit off center or anything, you could generally correct that when you go in with the bigger bit. But if you go in with the big bit right off the gate and you're a little bit off, you're kind of in a bit of trouble there. So drill out those holes, and then you can see I'm kind of wiping out the excess flashing on the inside that comes out when you drill these holes. And right now we're doing the headlights as well. You gotta go ahead and get those all cleaned out, and get those all kind of set in place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some pieces of styrene again, and what I'm doing here is I'm fitting them to the back side of the inside of the shell to cover up the marker light and the number board light locations, as well as the headlight locations. And the reason I'm doing that there is I need a place to mount my LEDs to. And the best way I've kind of come up to do to mount LEDs and shells like this is to just take that and glue it in there. Now, as you can see, there's our cut down frame, and there you can see how our keep alive's going to fit in there. So what we're going to do now we have our frame cut down, is we're going to go ahead and we're going to paint that black, just flat black acrylic paint. I'm not getting too carried away. I didn't include the me milling the frame down part, because that's me out in the garage. The lighting's not very good, and honestly it's just about 45 minutes of me standing there cutting a little bit away at a time until the frame gets too hot to touch, and then I gotta wait for it to cool off a little bit. So it's kind of, I'm using a Dremel and a bench grinder, so kind of it'd be neat to show, but at the same time it's kind of boring. But here we are taking our trucks apart. Now the reason we're going to take our trucks apart here, there's our little clip pieces on the bottom of the truck that you have to pop to get the side frames off. The reason we're taking this apart is because we got to paint the sides of the wheels, and we're also going to solder the connection from the wire to the power pickups, because from the factory Atlas had these clipped on, at least on this particular model. I believe on some of the newer ones they're finally starting to solder them, which is pretty awesome. But nevertheless, it is a lot easier to paint the wheels with the side frames off, and I would rather just take care of that now than wait until later when I'm doing the weathering and stuff. It's just easier to do it now while the model's all apart than wait until later. So here we are putting our solder on our wires there. You just got to cut that little clip off right there. Be careful not to cut the wire, but you just kind of got to crimp on it and it'll usually pop and fall right off. And just be careful so the wire doesn't move around too much. You just throw a little bit of solder on there and that just makes that connection better. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start throwing this back together now. And what we're gonna do here, we're gonna go ahead and put our motor back in. They're nice 2 screws, nice and easy there, nothing too wild and crazy with that one. And there's of course where our keep wire is going to fit. And then our side frames will pop right back on when we go to put this together. Sometimes you got to kind of pop it. It's when you pull them apart, you got to pop the clips on the bottom and hold it apart. And when you go to put it back together, normally you have to just pop those back up in there. And you can see me putting a little bit of oil in this. This again was a used model, so I don't know the history on it, and I might as well put a little bit of oil in there while I have it taken apart. So just get a nice healthy amount in there, that way I don't have to worry about needing to do that anytime soon. It's already done, we're already good, everything's good, so just kind of keep, fiddling with it. And again, just put some more oil in there. Get our drive shaft back in there. And again, we're going to test fit again because I can't test fit enough. So now we're going to start detailing our shell a little bit. And here you can see I'm going to swipe the brake wheel off of the RS11 donor model I had. And I got a little CA glue I'm going to use to attach it there. There's some Tichy grab irons, 30-15, the 18-inch drop type, I believe is what that all says. So what we're going to do here is there's going to be, at least on this particular Pacific Northwest resin shell, there's going to be little tiny dots where you could drill your holes. They actually have these marked, which is pretty awesome. So you got to go through and drill all those out, and then you can go ahead and start installing your grab irons here. So what I'm doing now is I'm going through to all the little spots that I know of where there's going to be grab irons, and I'm drilling out those holes with my little drill bit, trying not to break it, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that breaks every dang one of those all the time. It's just kind of the way it is. But once I get that done, I always take my grab irons and I trim them down a little bit so they're not hanging too far into the inside of the shell. It can make it a little bit more difficult to actually fish them into the holes, but I like that better than having them hanging in there where they could be interfering with wiring or other things inside of the shell. So it's going to take a little CA glue, pop them on there, and boom, we got some grab irons going on over here. And there, of course, here's the other grab irons we need for the top here. The first ones we used were a drop style. These are just a straight style. And these go up here on each end of the locomotive on the top, like above the number boards. So we gotta do 4 of those now. And of course, sometimes you drill out your holes and you go to put the grab iron in and it ain't even close, so you gotta, re-drill them and fix them up a little bit. That's how we're gonna get all those on. And next we have these little lift ring deals that are on the end sides of the locomotive here. Now for these, I didn't really, there's no marks on the shell for them, and I just kind of eyeballed it based on the prototype photos. We're using some of these little eye bolt deals from KV models here. I really enjoy these. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fish those on there now. A little CA glue in the holes we just drilled. Alright, and now we have to make these little loop deals that were up on the top. They're kind of this little weird little lift ring loop deal. So what I do here is I take some phosphor bronze wire there, and I take and I bend the wire around a drill bit, and that gives me that little loop lift ring deal. As you can see, I just kind of eyeball it and drill holes, and hopefully they fit. Again, just kind of, this is one of the moments where I'm going to completely admit the fact that I'm winging it here on this one, because you know, this is just kind of I know what I need to have there, and I just got to figure out a way to make it. So I just kind of find a drill bit that's kind of close when I bend it and make it work. And they actually turned out pretty decent. Um, it's up to you as to how long you want to make the wire coming off of them. I kept them kind of short because I knew that I didn't want to have them like hanging down too far into the shell. It might have been a little bit too short, but they still work. They're still on there. They haven't broken off or nothing. So here we are. We're going to do this little side step deal here on the side of the locomotive here. This is just sheet styrene that I'm literally just cutting to fit. Again, kind of looking at the prototype photos and kind of just, eyeballing it off of that there. These like steps, they're all about the same for the most part, at least in the photos I found between each one of these. But they can, they are what they are. Some might be a little bit different. And now we're going to add some grab irons here to the end of our locomotive. We're going to start doing some of our end pilot detail here. And of course, I'm using my classic red paint trick here, where I take the grab iron, I dip it in red, the ends of it in red paint, and I hold it up to the model where I want, so that way I have my marks down for where I need to drill at specifically to add these grab irons. These are the straight 18-inch Tichy grab irons that we used earlier for the top of the locomotive, so we could use those. We're using those same grab irons here on the end for these end ones. And again, as I mentioned earlier, reference prototype photos, go off of what your specific unit number you're trying to build has, because again, with Conrail and with these were all, rebuild kind of deals. They all vary, they're all a little bit different. So this particular number I went with here, the 1114, it only had like 3 on each end. It was kind of strange, but here we're swiping the cut bar off of our RS11 now. And we're just going to go ahead and we're going to put that on our end here. And again, I'm just kind of eyeballing that and drilling some holes. I believe this, I don't remember if this cut bar only had 2 holes, like 1 on each end of it, or if the middle ones broke off, or what the story was. But I'm just trying to use parts off of the shell I already have to try and save a couple bucks as opposed to spending even more money on even more stuff. That's what's kind of difficult about a build like this is you got to get 2 donor locomotives just to make this happen, just to have all the parts, just to have the base parts you need, because if you try to buy the parts individually, it gets a little bit expensive. But so I try to reuse as much as I can from each one if there's little parts I can use. Now here for this, on the end of these slug units, they had like the little wire connection deals for the power to the slug deal from the SD38. And I'm just I took a Details West, one of the MU hose clusters, and I actually cut the hoses off of it. And I used that as to be like the dummy receptacle from the actual locomotives. It's not an exact look kind of deal, but it looks close enough for me to be happy with it. Because generally on the end that wasn't hooked up to the locomotive, there'll be the 3 MU hoses on one side, and then there'll be that dummy receptacle on the other side. And I just didn't feel like messing around with trying to make something that, at the end of the day, I figured if I cut the hoses off that Details West part, it'll look close enough. Now there's our Alco side handrail stanchion set B. I can read goodly. These are from KV models, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start doing our handrails on these. These are going to be completely hand-done handrails on here because there is no handrail kit that'll fit these. So we're using the handrail stanchion set from KV models. And to start off with, to do these, for one, KV has some really great tips and info on their website that you buy these handrail sets from. Well, the stanchion sets, I should say. So make sure you guys kind of read that. I'm not big on, following directions and stuff, but this is one of them situations where you got to kind of, read and know what the heck you're doing so that it turns out decent. So for these KV models stanchions here, we have these little plates you guys are seeing. I'm putting those down on the shell everywhere that there's going to be a handrail stanchion. And you'll see why here in a minute why we do that. Now these are actually designed to cover up the factory holes in the Atlas sill. Unfortunately, with our MT-6 build, it's not going to quite work out that way because the handrail locations on the MT-6 were different than what they were from the factory on the RSD-12s and all that. Conrail changed them up when they redid them a little bit. Now, once you get those little plates on there and the glue is very, very dry, you want to come back with your micro drill bit. You have to drill a hole on each side of those plates right up against the plate. And I know what you're thinking. If you guys are thinking, Steve, why do I feel like when I go to drill those holes, those damn plates are going to come right off of there? Well, that's because they are. You got to be very, very careful. You want to drill those holes right up against the plates, but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes when you're dealing with CA glue and metal, the stuff likes to kind of pop apart on you. So we're going to just, take our time and take our time and take our time. We're going to drill those holes on each side and get those drilled out. That way we can mount our stanchions to our shell. Now here you can see I'm going to start mounting all my handrail stanchions. These you have to like fold a certain way and all that, and again, this is what I mentioned earlier about making sure you read the directions from KV. They have some great photo directions on how to bend their handrail stanchions and make them from the flat deal you get when you buy them to what they need to be to go on the model. I highly, 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 highly recommend that you read those directions and follow them. And that's basically what I did. Was I made, the 10 stanchions I needed for one side. I bended them all up and got them all together. And then I started gluing them in place on the model. And they have these little, the reason we had to drill those little holes is they have these little nubs on the bottom of them that sit down in there that really help keep the stanchions hooked to the model. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get all these handrail stanchions down the side of this. And one of the nice parts about this model is once you get that in, you go ahead and you can fish your wire straight through. It's a straight shot. And as you can see, I'm actually soldering all of the stanchions to the wire handrail. And the reason I do that is just to make them stiffened up a little bit more. I would rather use the solder as opposed to trying to CA glue them. I feel like it's a little bit more of a sturdy connection. You just got to be careful you don't get too carried away with the solder, but once you get that done and your handrails are pretty well stuck in there, we can go ahead and we can start bending the ends of our handrails. Now this is another place I'm going to note that I kind of did a stupid, and when I did these, I had the phosphor bronze wire from Tichy, and I didn't realize it when I put it in there. It was a little bit too short to make the proper ends of the handrails, and I kind of found that out the hard way. And since then, I found out that Tichy has 3-foot long sections of this wire, and I bought some of those for when I do more of these in the future. But for the purposes of this build and using what I had on hand, you guys are going to see like on one end, it's just barely going to work. The handrail's just barely going to reach down far enough. But here you can see it didn't quite reach down far enough, so what I'm having to do is take another piece of wire and try to solder it onto the end of it so that way it'll reach down the step well all the way. I mean, it's literally probably, oh gosh, like a 1/16 of an inch too short. I mean, it's barely anything, but just enough to be frustrating, I guess the best way to put it there. So we're just kind of drilling those out and getting them in there. And then as you can see, here's our handrail stanchions going in on the end. Also from KV Models, it's the RS11 handrail stanchion kit. That's what you need there. But we go ahead and get those on there. And while I'm at it, gotta throw my drop step on there too while I'm working on this. I wanted to wait until I at least got those stanchions on there before I put the drop step on, because I have a really good habit of breaking those off at some point after I put them on when I'm detailing stuff. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to bend our end handrails, and KV sells this really great little handrail bending jig, which, oh my gosh, what a great, these are awesome. I bought it because I plan on doing a bunch of these slugs over time, but I picked this one up just for, try it out, and I'm really happy with it. Really makes making these end handrails easy. I don't know about a lot of you guys, I suck at bending handrails, but I try, but I'm still no good at it. So that jig really makes it easy. Put it on there, a little CA glue to hold it in place on the end of the end sill of the locomotive, and then we of course will solder the connection up there at the top and trim off our excess from the middle there as well. You always want to kind of make these handrails a hair long, that way they stick all the way through and you have room to solder, and then you could cut them down. So you see again bending with our KV jig, getting her on there. You gotta kind of eyeball out where the hole for the handrail should be going into the end of the sill there, and solder and cut. Alright, so now we're going to use some brass chain, A-line chain. What does that say there? 29216 is the part number from A-line. And again, I'm going to solder this on there. Why? Because if I use CA glue, it's going to fall off of there. Guaranteed. And of course, there's my drop step I managed to knock off because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty good at doing that. And we had to put our little MU hose or MU receptacle on the end. Now, I'm going to apologize here. I did another stupid. I forgot to, film me painting the shell. I don't know how I forgot to do that, but I did. But there's our shell. Just to summarize it real quick, I use Scale Coat 2 Conrail blue paint. And all I do is I paint the shell black first, and then I come back and I paint it with the Conrail blue. And the reason I do it that way is by painting the shell black first, it generally helps prevent any sort of light bleed you can run into, which is always a bit of an issue. So I just go in, I paint flat black first, I'll paint the whole shell, and then I come back and I do my blue over the top of it. So all you guys missed is the like 10-second clip of me spraying with an airbrush and not knowing what I'm doing. But here we are painting the end sill, or the what's the word I'm looking for here? The end pilot of the truck of the shell here. And I'm just coming in and doing all my black painting now. With the handrails all kind of being permanently secured there, the only way to do all this painting on the sill and the walkways and all that stuff, all this black paint you gotta do, is doing it by hand. I'm not gonna bore you guys with the entire clip of this, but while that paint's drying, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start messing around with my motor and drive over here. As you guys can see, we got our keep alive is already down in the fuel tank, and I'm trying to solder it in place. Now, the decoder I'm using here is a Loc Pilot Nano. It's actually an N-scale decoder from ESU, and the reason I'm using it is it a very, very, very tight fit inside of this shell, and I mean very tight. I would love to be able to put a decoder buddy or a 21-pin decoder. There's just not enough room. So I had to go with that Loc Pilot Nano just to try and make that work. It was very, very tight. So now our shell's dry. We're going to go ahead, and as you guys can see, I got some pieces of shrink tube there. And what I'm doing is I'm putting some electrical tape on it, because what I'm going to use this shrink tube for is to help keep my wiring neat inside of the shell there. So you guys can see, I just want to keep the wiring neat and up and out of the drive shafts and everything. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start fishing our wiring through our headlight housings there. Now, I mentioned earlier I took that sheet styrene and glued it to the back of all my light locations, my headlights, marker lights, number boards, and then you drill a very, very small hole through each of those, and that's what you feed your LED lights through. So right now we're doing our headlights, or I think this is actually the rear light if I'm not mistaken. We'll know here in a second. But we start doing these, and I work, I start at one end and I work my way down. Here we have rear light. As you guys can see, I label them. That way I know which one's which. I always get all of my wiring and LEDs fed into the shell before I start actually wiring anything to the decoder board from any of the lights to the decoder board. It just makes life a lot easier. But you can see how that shrink tube in there really helps keep the wiring neat. And again, just you fish your wires through, you get both of them through, and then you take your tape and put the wires together and then label it. That way you know what's what when it comes to actually connecting it to the decoder. So there you can see we're fishing some more through there. And twisting up wires, putting tape on. And then when I get it pretty good in there, I put that little piece of the tape in there just to hold it all down. But I'm not going to bore you with doing both sides. That was one side. Now we're going to start soldering some stuff. So we're going to start off with our headlights and stuff here. So it's pretty pretty simple here. You take the blue wires and you put them together, you take the red wires, you put them together, and then the red ones go to the U plus on the decoder board, and the blue ones go to whatever specific function you want. So like for your headlight, the blue wires would go to the headlight, the red wires would go to whatever U plus, it doesn't matter. So I always start off, and what I'll do is I'll do my headlight and rear light first, and then, you know, like if I have ditch lights, which would be auxiliary 1 and 2, I'll do those second and third. This doesn't have it, but I'm just saying for reference here. And then I'll get into doing number boards and marker lights last. I do it that way because when you're doing a project like this, you look at it and there's, you know, 20 little freaking wires, and it's like, oh my gosh, what in the heck am I doing? If you break it down and you just do, you know, one thing and then another thing and another thing, next thing you know, you got all the wires connected and everything's good to go. So wiring is only as challenging as you make it. If you break it down and you keep it simple, it's really not that complicated. It's just you have to break it down and not get overwhelmed by all the wires that are in there. Just remember that, you know, well, only 2 of these wires are this and 2 are for that. It just is going to make life a lot less stressful when it comes to doing this. And trying to do the, like, this was I've worked with one of these Loc Pilot Nanos before, but my goodness, I forgot how hard it was to try and solder to these boards. All the little connections are so tiny on these specific boards. I wish there was a better option for a board than this, something where I had a little bit more to work with, but this is just what I had to work with. It's the best I could really come up with, because with the motor in there, that decoder board is basically almost up against the inside of the shell. I mean, there's barely any room. So we get all that done, and now we're going to go ahead and we have our shell is back on our motor and drive here. Everything's secured down. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start painting all of our white on our shell here. Our ends of the handrails, our steps. There's also like the white on some of the grab irons in the end, and the coupler cut bar as well. I'll make a quick note here. If you use the newer style RS11 frame that has the frame mounted couplers, it's a little bit simpler because you just put your couplers and coupler boxes in. If you're using the old style like what I did here, where the couplers are body mounted, the only decent real way, I'll be honest with you guys, I came up with to secure the body to the frame was actually to use a little bit of CA glue just barely along the edges of it. Here we're putting a little red on the MU receptacle there on the end, as well as some silver on our little MU hoses there too. But to decide to CA glue the thing to the frame, boy, that was a bit nerve-wracking, but it worked. Now we're going to go ahead and we're start putting our quality decals on here. Again, just using my prototype photos. I'm using a little bit of the red micro scale stuff. I think it's micro sol maybe. I can't remember if it's sol or set. It's the red bottle though. I dip the decal in water first and let it soak in there. And then I brush the micro sol on first, and then when I slide the decal off the sheet, it goes on really well. And then for some of the smaller decals, I'll use just the micro set. I'll just dip them in the micro set and then put them directly onto the shell. But one of the nicer parts about doing these slugs is they don't have a lot of decals, so it makes it kind of simple and easy, and it's not as rip my hair out as what it can be doing some models. Just kind of nice and simple, just big logos, numbers, and then of course we got to do the damn white stripe down the side, of course, because, you know, there's got to be that one decal that just makes you crazy trying to do it, and here we have that. Of course, you go to pull it off the sheet and it rips. It's just always something, but fortunately we got it on there pretty good. And you can sit there and fiddle with it and try and get it perfect over and over again. There's our little front labels going on the end there to denote the end that's the front. Okay, so we clear coated. Now we're going to start on our weathering here. And what I'm using here is this rust colored paint. It's Badger Model Flex. I think it's airbrush paint technically. And as you guys know, old Steve likes to get pretty wild and heavy with our weathering here. And with these units being in yard service, they really got the con rust deal going on. So what I'm doing here is that this rust paint is basically my base coat. We're going to come back with some powder later and really gnarly it up a little bit more. So I'm just using this as a base coat, and what I'm doing is I'm coming down and I'm painting all the flat surfaces. You can see here I kind of do a little bit along the tops of the air tank and the fuel tank, and then I'm wiping it off with a Q-tip there. As you can see, I'm getting pretty heavy here on the truck area as well, and I'm coming back and wiping it off with the Q-tip. And that's how you kind of do your like streaking and stuff on the fuel tank, like that rusty kind of deal's streaking down. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, boy, Steve, that looks absolutely horrible. And yeah, you're not wrong. It looked pretty bad there. But it always comes together in the end. And we'll come back with a little bit of black later and kind of work it in. But right now, we're just kind of trying to get a big base coat on everything. That way we could just get our general kind of starting coat down there to build off of with our weathering here. And this is also why I don't get too carried away when I'm painting the black on like the side walkways and stuff. If I'm doing a locomotive that's going to be this level of rusty and dirty, I'm not going to get too carried away as far as trying to have all that black paint on the walkways be absolutely perfect, because you're going to paint right over it anyway with the rust paint. So I just get it close enough to where, you know, when I get a little sloppy with the rust paint, you can see the black walkway coming through, and it kind of looks a little more prototypical anyway. So again, just coming in and hitting those trucks and making sure they look absolutely terrible here. But they'll come around. Just gotta keep playing with it. That's part of the fun of weathering. Any of you out there that maybe, you know, you're on the fence about whether you want to try doing weathering or not, I really say go for it. Just gotta have the confidence that it's gonna turn out in the end, and you know, you're gonna start on something and you're gonna get halfway through and you're just gonna think, oh my gosh, this looks terrible, I ruined this. And it's like, well, no, you didn't ruin it. You just gotta know what to do next to bring it to life and bring it together. There's no like one step trick to weathering. If you want good weathering, it's you know, 3, 4, 5 steps all put together that all individually would look terrible, but when you put them all together, they look great. So here we are doing our painting on the top, and you'd see I kind of get a little bit carried away with the paint in some spots, and I end up coming back with a Q-tip and kind of straightening up along those edges and stuff. It's kind of, you know, I don't care who you are, there's no way you can paint a perfectly straight line like that without having a little bit of trouble. But there I am, I'm throwing a little black on these grills on the side as well. Just kind of cover those up a bit. All right, now we're over here we're going to take this thing to Powder Town here with our powder weather. And I'm using this rusty red stuff from, I think it's Bragdon. I really got to look at what the thing says. I use this in all my weathering stuff on locomotives, and I can't remember what the name of it is, but I think it's Bragdon Enterprises or something like that, Bragdon Powders. But basically here, I think I've mentioned this before. With these powders, when you clear coat them, you lose a pretty decent amount of it. So my advice always is, when you're doing something like this con rust, where you're trying to get the tops and the sills and all that extra rusty, just go to town and lay that stuff on there. Get heavy with it, you know, go to town. Because when you clear coat it, you're going to lose about half of what you put on there. So if you go overboard, by the time you clear coat it, it's going to end up looking right. So we clear coated, and there you guys can kind of see we've got that nice rusty tone going on everywhere. And right now I'm fighting to cut the trip pin off my couplers, because y'all know I don't use trip pins. So gotta cut those off. And right now we're gonna make our covers for our number boards. I'm just using sheet styrene and just eyeballing it. And I'm gonna let you guys in a little CR Steve insider secret here, you know, a little secret to locomotive builds. Sometimes these don't fit in there perfect. In the case of these, I got them close enough to where they just barely covered the housing. They were hanging over like a little bit, but I didn't want to go nuts and try and fish them in the hole and stuff. So I just got them close, and then I put the decal over them, and you can't tell that it's not perfectly flush. So just a little pro tip there, don't like make yourselves crazy trying to cut those to perfectly fit in those housings. You'll make yourselves insane. Now we're gonna make our end, our little lenses for our like lights here. This is like fiber optic cord, and you can see I'm playing with fire here. And what you do is you hold the end of the fiber optic cord up towards a flame, and it basically will make you a little lens. Isn't that nifty? That's pretty nifty. But it's like a little clear fiber optic cord. I've got a bunch of this stuff. I bought it on eBay a few years ago, and I've been using it ever since. And you just, you hold it up to the flame. It'll kind of like round and bubble up a little bit, and then you could take and use that for your marker light lenses there. I use that for headlights, marker lights, all that stuff. And it's nice because you can make them bigger, you can make them small. It's all about how much, how you hold it up to the flame, etc. And the beautiful part is, at least when I bought this stuff, it was cheap. I mean, I think I got like 10 feet of it for like $5 or something when I bought it a couple years back. And so worst case, you mess up, you can just, you cut it off, you throw out that little one you messed up, and you make another one because you got 10 feet of the crap. So really, really great stuff to work with. So just, play around with that a little bit. Y'all kind of learn that as you go. And here we're about to finish this up here. I'm using some decals from Shell Scale here. We're going to go ahead and put those on there. We got to start off by doing the backing pieces there, and then we'll come in and we'll do the actual numbers here last. But that's going to pretty much wrap up this video here. I want to go ahead and I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to go ahead and say I know this was I know there's probably some stuff missing in here that I'm not even realizing. And if there's any questions, guys, feel free to ask. I'll also be putting up a parts list here for this build in the description within the next couple days. I'm not going to have time to do it today, unfortunately, but I will be putting that up there. Any questions you guys have on doing one of these builds, just ask. I'm more than willing to help you out along the way. But as always, guys, I want to thank everybody for watching. Without everybody poking me to do this build here a while back, I never probably would have gotten it done this year. So I want to thank everybody that kind of pushed me to do this year. But as always, guys, I'm CR Steve, and I'll see you in the next video.